So this is the final result that I have from all of the edits that I've shown you. And we're just gonna unpack this to see how we got the final result. So we started with a background. We added a texture. We added a gradient. And then there's a color lookup, which I'll explain in a different step here. So I'm going to collapse that folder. Then I started adding, oh well, you know what, I need to bring up Jameson here. So then I brought in Jameson. He was very dark, so I did an edit. I also did a color lookup, which made him a little bit more dramatic. So a color lookup, notice this is Kodak 5205 Fuji. Okay, I'm going to delete this layer. And this edit is nice. It's a very warm color. Nothing wrong with it, but I wanted to see if I could just make it a little bit more dramatic. So while I was on the layer, I went down to my layer adjustments and I selected color lookup. And in the properties panel, you want to use the first menu item here. This is where you can load in different effects. So this, I believe, is the one that I used. You can go in and try a lot of different, see how that one's warmer. This one's cooler. I really do not like how that looks. So you can go in and look at a lot of different things, but I chose this one. I really liked how it looked, but what I did is I'm going to control click on this layer because it applied it to the whole image. You can see here because of the white, I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to create a clipping mask, and it's just going to be applied to the subject, not my background. So that is what a color lookup does. You can just load in different kind of styles. Okay, so then after that, I added some fog. And let's see here, let me turn off these effects. So I added another gradient, and you can see here when I go to my gradient tool how I've adjusted it so it just kind of starts to take out his lower body a little bit with the gradient. Then I did a color lookup on that gradient. You can barely tell. Actually, I put 2 on there that you can't tell. And then I started using my paintbrush, and I'm going to show you here. If I get my paintbrush, and I'm going to paint with white. And again, remember with our paintbrush, we want to make sure that we're using the right, I keep saying fog, but I used a powder brush. So what I was doing is I was painting on a new layer. Notice I made a new layer. In fact, I'm going to hide this to show you. I made a new layer. And why is my powder kind of transparent? It's because the flow of my brush is set down. So I had a bunch of powder. Well, I don't want it all over Jameson. So again, we've done this before. I'm going to create a mask. And now with black, I'm going to start to take that out. Now I did lower the flow to start to just leave some aspects of it so that it isn't just kind of solid black, I'm sorry, solid white. So you can just go back and forth between how you want to create this effect. Okay, so that's how I did that. This was the original. Actually, even kind of like the new one I made. And then I made a brightness contrast edit. So that was my fog and gradient number 2. We have Harvey. Then I have fog number 1. Again, it's the same thing, but notice because the fog is below Jameson, it's now behind him. So I had this top layer was the gradient in front, or the fog in front of him. and then this is what is behind. And I did the same thing. I created a color lookup that I applied. It went to the whole background, and it allowed my background to show up a little bit more. I did a mask so that I could take away fog here. Notice how it's kind of getting a more transparent fog. That's because I used the mask. And then I added the number, his jersey number 23 in the back. So I made a text layer, I rasterized it, and then I did a color lookup. You can see here that was a little bit brighter. I wanted it to fade more. Also notice that I did, on the 23, I took the fill down of that layer, and then I command clicked. I went down into color lookup, and I can't remember what I used. It was probably the same Kodak one, maybe. I'd have to look up and see which one I used before. Let's see. If I look here. Okay, I used Moonlight for that. Okay, so that's great. So that's for his jersey number. And again, it's behind him because it's below his layer. Anything below Jameson is going to be behind him. So then I added some lightning, and I have a gradient. This is, oh, that's, I already showed you that. And my gradient, this is what actually made this halo, kind of this spotlight before him. Before I had it kind of really small, and it was kind of coming above his head, and I thought that looked a little too kind of spiritual halo. So I also wanted it to kind of encapsulate his shoulders a little bit, so I made it wider and then brought it down because I still want to see the number, his jersey number. So you can just kind of play around with how far you drag this, and that is pretty much it except the text. So what I did here is I made his last name, Harney, in literally a gray type. But I remember when we used DaFont and we downloaded Collegiate. So let me just hide this real quick for you. So I'm going to get a gray color here, maybe kind of a light gray, use text. Let's go to my Collegiate caps. We're going to type in Harney. Why can't I see that? I couldn't see the text because it was way, way down here. This is again why having all of these collapsed is great, because then you can see where you're going. So I'm on Harney, Command T. I am going to make it pretty big. Come down here. Again, if I want to manipulate this, I need to right click. I need to rasterize the type. I'm going to command click. Then I'm going to go up. I love this layer style, blending options. And let's command plus to zoom in here so we can see. So I just experimented here, and I literally went in and played around with all the different settings on these highlights. It honestly, you literally do want to take the time to go in and play around with each one. I really can't stress it enough about how important that is. So let me hide this one. We'll bring back Command D. Look at that. So that is a final result. Can't wait to see what you create.